Today, we're diving into a really fascinating paradox. Iran has this massive 2,600-kilometer coastline on one of the most strategic waterways in the entire world. And yet, almost all of it is completely undeveloped. Let's get into why. Just take a look at this. It's a satellite image from space. The coastlines of the Middle East just glow like a string of jewels. You can see the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, all lit up like crazy. But then you get to Iran, and it's just dark, a huge stretch of black. Now, this isn't a power outage. This is a deliberate choice, a mystery that's been centuries in the making. So why on earth is this incredibly valuable coastline just left in the dark? I mean, think about it. On one side of the Gulf, you've got these nations that have turned literal desert into booming economic hubs. You've got icons like Dubai's Burj Khalifa that you can see from space. Then you look across the water to Iran. Empty ports, hardly any major development. It's the same water, the same geography, but it's like we're looking at two completely different realities. And here's what makes this so wild. This isn't just any old coastline. It sits right on the Strait of Hormuz. A staggering 20%, a full fifth of the entire world's oil supply sails right past this empty shore. This isn't just some nice beachfront property. It is arguably one of the most valuable stretches of coast on the planet. Okay, so to really get to the bottom of this, we need to rewind the clock, way back, because this is not a new thing. Iran's decision to basically turn its back on the sea is rooted in this centuries-old national security strategy. Think of it as a kind of fortress mentality that has defined the country for ages. For over 3,000 years, every single major Iranian empire put its capital, its center of power, deep inland, far, far away from the coast. And no, that wasn't an accident. It was a completely deliberate move. It was the absolute core of their grand strategy for survival. So why? Well, because history taught them a very, very hard lesson. Their coast was their greatest vulnerability. From Alexander the Great, to the Arab conquest, to the Portuguese, to the British, almost every single major invasion came from the sea. The rule became pretty simple. If you live on the coast, you're the first to fall. But you might be wondering, how did these inland empires even survive in a pretty arid land? Well, through sheer ingenuity. This right here is the Qanat system. It's an incredible network of underground tunnels stretching for miles that brought fresh water from the mountains straight into the inland cities. It was brilliant. It protected their most vital resource from the scorching sun, sure, but crucially, it also protected it from being poisoned or cut off by invaders. And this whole inland strategy was basically supercharged by Iran's amazing geography. You've got these massive mountain ranges, the Zagros and the Alborz, that acted like impenetrable walls. And then you have two vast, deadly deserts that formed a kind of natural moat. This geography just made those inland cities so much more survivable, shielding them from all the threats that came from the sea. All right, so let's fast forward to today. That historical fortress strategy has evolved. Now, the reason the coast remains so empty is less about foreign armies and a lot more about a modern economic system that is built on total state control. The real turning point was the 1979 revolution. The new leadership came in and systematically dismantled the entire private sector. Industries, insurance, factories, you name it, it was nationalized. They pushed out experienced business owners and replaced them with revolutionaries and clerics loyal to the new regime. The goal was to consolidate all economic power in the hands of the state. And the result is what you see today. The actual, true private sector makes up just 10 to 12% of Iran's economy. That means nearly 90% is controlled by the state or groups tied to the state, creating an economic landscape that is fundamentally different from its neighbors. This system creates massive roadblocks to development. For instance, Iran has never really set up a stable, reliable, legal framework for public-private partnerships. Without those kinds of laws, it's pretty much impossible for any private company, foreign or domestic, to invest the huge amounts of money needed to build big coastal projects like new ports or cities. And even if an investor is willing to take the risk, they run straight into the brick wall of international sanctions. I mean, take the French oil giant, Total Energies. They had a $5 billion investment all ready to go, but they had to pull out because of the threat of U.S. sanctions. You know, the kind that punish non-U.S. companies for doing business with Iran. They said it themselves. We cannot risk losing access to the U.S. financial system. And that's how foreign investment just gets choked off. So here's the great irony. That very same geography that protected Iran for centuries, the mountains, the deserts, the distance from the sea, it's now become a kind of curse. It's actually contributing to a really severe internal crisis that is pushing its own people to the breaking point. The economic side effects of this isolation are just brutal. Let's look at ship traffic. In a single month, Dubai handles about 2,400 ships. In that same period, all of Iran's ports, combined, see about 85. One coast is a bustling global hub, the other is basically a security zone. But now an even bigger crisis is unfolding: water. Last year was the driest in 2 decades for Iran. And while rainfall dropped about 32% across the whole country, which is bad enough, in the coastal regions it plummeted by a catastrophic 90%. There was practically no rain. And the consequence of that is a massive wave of internal migration. Every single year, an estimated 1 million people are forced to leave their homes and move inland, fleeing the severe drought and water shortages that are making life on the coast impossible. And of course, this environmental crisis is fueling a political one. The coastal provinces, which are ironically rich in resources like oil, are plagued by high unemployment, decaying infrastructure, and these chronic water shortages. You combine that with heavy militarization, and you get waves of protests and a lot of growing unrest. So, when you put all these pieces together, the history, the economics, the environmental crisis, we finally get to the real core of the issue. The problem isn't just about water or sanctions. It's really a crisis of trust. At the end of the day, it all comes down to this. You have 2 completely different systems sharing one gulf. One side chose openness, foreign investment, and building trust. The other side chose control, isolation, and a system that actively repels investment. The empty, dark coast is the natural outcome of that choice. And what this whole story shows is that in our modern world, wealth doesn't just follow resources anymore. Capital, money, it flows where it feels safe. It follows systems that are built on trust, the trust that your investment will be protected and that the rules of the game aren't going to change on you overnight. Ultimately, Iran didn't just fail to develop its coast. That empty, silent shoreline is really just a physical symptom of a much deeper problem, a massive loss of trust, both from its own people inside the country and from the rest of the world looking in. Which leaves us with a final big question to think about. That dark coastline we saw at the beginning is such a stark visual reminder of the kinds of choices a nation can make. And it really makes you wonder, when a nation consistently chooses control over trust, what is the ultimate price it pays?